This is National 5 Relationships Unit Assessment Practice, and what we're going to be looking at here is the graphs of quadratic relationships. Okay, we've got questions 6, 7, 8 and 9 to cover here. The questions are out of 9 marks and you're required to achieve 5 to pass this standard. So this is standard 1.2. Okay, let's start with question 6. I've got 3 questions, I think, for each. So I'll do the first one and you can freeze the video and try the others yourself. So when we look at this here, I've got a quadratic graph that's here. I know the equation of the graph, and a parabola just means that it's a parabolic shape like this one here. So I'm going to go for the equation of the graph. First of all, I know that y is equal to kx squared. So that's the first thing I'm going to use. What I've got to do here is I've got to find out the value of k. Now I don't have too many clues on here. There's no coordinates that are spotted at all. But what I can do is I can see there's coordinates about. So there's one there, so that's 1, 2. There's a coordinate there that I could possibly use as well, so that's going to be 2, 8. There are others over here as well, so there's one there that's minus 2, 8. And what I've got here is minus 1, 2. So I could use these, and there's 0, 0 there. 0, 0 doesn't help me at all in this type of question here, so I'd choose one of the others. A simple one to choose would be the one that's here. I know that I've got 1, 2. I know that that's my x coordinate, that's my y coordinate, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to substitute these values into this equation here. So what I'll do is I'll call this one equation number 1, and I'll substitute x is equal to 1 and y is equal to 2 into my equation number 1. Right, go ahead and do that. So instead of y, I'm going to put a 2, I've got a k value here, I'll put a 1 in for the x, and I'm going to square that. So what that will tell me is that I've got k on this side, so that's just going to work out to be 1. 1k is equal to 2, so simply my value of k is going to be equal to 2. So the real equation of this graph that's here will be y is equal to, I'll just substitute the 2 in where k is, x squared. What you'll get here is you'll get the mark for just going for the k value in this one here. Good practice again, just making sure that you write down the equation of the graph. Okay, here we go for the others. So starting again, y is equal to kx squared. Call that equation number 1. Just pick a point, so there's a point there I can see, so that's 1, 3. Okay, I've got other points I could use, but let's just use this one here, that'll be straight away to do it. So I'll substitute x equals 1 and y equals 3 into that equation there. So 3 on this side, I've got the k value, I've got 1, which makes it quite simple. I just square 1, which is 1, so that will just give me k is equal to 3, or just write it round the other way, k equals 3. And again, that's going to be my answer. The equation of that graph, y is equal to 3x squared. It's in that form there, just with the number that I've worked out. Let's go for this one here. So what I can see here is 1 and 5. So there's a value there. Or I could go for 2 and, where's that crossing over there? 20, 220. I could use any of these values. I'm steering away from the negative values. The positive values are a bit easier to work through. So let's go for that again. Y is equal to kx squared. I'll substitute and let's go for this one up here. So I'll substitute x equals 2 and I'll go for y is equal to 20 this time, okay? But I could have just substituted the 1, 5 in and I would have got the same type of result here. Substituting these values in, 20 is equal to k, and I've got 2 here squared. Work that out, I've got 4k on this side equals 20. So what I know here is k is equal to 20 divided by 4, which gives me a value of 5. So k equals 5, and that's where I'm going to get my mark. Just one mark for this. Equation of this graph up above, y is equal to 5x squared. Okay, so remember this one here, just out of 1. Let's look at question 7. Again, 3 questions I've got here for you. Right, so what we've got is the quadratic functions below are in the form of y is equal to x plus a squared plus b. I have to work out the values of a and b. Right, so I know that this is in the completing the square type format, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the turning point to find out my values of A and B. So let's just identify the turning point that's here. So it's going to be right there, so X value is going to be 2 for the turning point, 2, and 5 for the Y coordinate of that turning point there. Right, I know that when I've got a turning point of 2, it's been slid along the graph to the right, so I know that in a bracket it's going to be a negative. So from here, I'm going to just write out the equation here. It's going to be x minus 2, so that's that there, and the 5 will be a plus 5 that's there. That would be my values for B. So value for A, as I can see from here, I've got minus 2, and for B, I've got 5 that appears there. So what I'll get in the way of marks, I'm just going to get 1 mark for getting the minus 2 for A, and 1 mark for getting the value for B. Let's look at the turning point of part B here. So there's a coordinate there, so my turning point of this one here is going to be minus 4, and the value there is 1. Minus 4 and 1. So if I was to write that into the equation, I know that I've slid the graph along to the left, so if I slide it to the left, it's going to be a positive number that's going to appear in there, and it's going to be a positive 4. And the value that I've got up here on the turning point is 1 for the Y coordinate. So again here I'll just lift out the values, so A is going to be equal to 4, B here is equal to 1, and there's my 2 marks. Final question here, I've got a point there, there's my turning point, so I'll just identify what that's going to be. So what I've got is along this way minus 2 for my X coordinate and minus 4 for the Y coordinate. From there I can write that into the equation. So I know that I've slid it along to the left, so that's going to be a positive number that's going to be appearing in here. So that's going to be plus 2 squared. I've got a minus 4 there. And remember, I just take the Y coordinate straight into that type of format, and that will be minus 4 there. From there I can see that my A value is 2, my B value is minus 4, and 2 marks for that one there. Let's look at question 8. So question 8 here, what we've got is we've got to sketch the following graphs and clearly identify all important points. Right, so the first one I'm going for is y is equal to x minus 1 bracket x minus 5. And that helps me in that format to find out where my roots are. So the first thing I'm going to do is find out the roots. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to find where they cut the x-axis. So where it cuts the x-axis, I know that the y coordinate is equal to 0. So what I'll say first of all is let y equal 0. So if that equals 0, I've got x minus 1 and x minus 5. What I'll then do is I can solve that by saying x minus 1 equals 0, so x equals 1, and x minus 5 equals 0, so x equals 5. So that's a set of coordinates that I've got already. So they're my roots, and that coordinate there will be 1, 0, that coordinate there will be 5, 0. So 1, 0, 1 mark there, 5, 0, 1 mark there on my graph already. I've just pre-printed some graphs, so it just saves a bit of time. Now another point that's really important is where it cuts the y-axis. So where it cuts the y-axis, I know that my x-coordinate all the way along there is equal to 0. So what I'll say is I'll let x equal 0. So if I let x equal 0, I can find out my y value. I'll just substitute the 0 in there. And what I've got here is I've got minus 1 times minus 5. That just works out to be minus 1 times minus 5. And that gives me a value of 5. And the coordinate that I get from there is 0, 5. So I'll just plot that as well. So 0, 5 is there. So that's me got 3 points already. Next thing I need to do is to find the turning point. So I know that the turning point is the midpoint, or the x value will be the midpoint between these two values here. So if I find the midpoint, what I can do is I can then add these two numbers together and divide them by 2. So my x value is going to be 1 plus 5 divided by 2, which gives me the axis of symmetry. So that will be 6 divided by 2, which equals 3. So x equals 3 is the axis of symmetry. So that's the turning point is going to lie on this line here somewhere. So what I'll do is I'll substitute the 3 into the equation up here, and it's a 3 for the x, and we'll see how we go from there. So the turning point that we're going to get is going to be, the y coordinate is 3 minus 1 and 3 minus 5. So all I've done is substituted the 3 into these places here. What I get is 2 from this one, and 3 minus 5 is going to be minus 2. That will give me a value of minus 4. So that gives me a coordinate of 3 minus 4. And that there is my turning point. So 3 along the way, 4 down, there we go. So that's me got my points that I need to draw the graph. So let's go and draw these just now. So I'll draw it through there, through there, through there, just turning here, turning up the way, and back through there. And it should go all the way up from there. Right, so the important bits would be to make sure that I've got that labelled up as 5, this one here labelled as 1, this one here labelled as a 5 cutting through in the roots, and then making sure that the turning point there is identified as 3, 4. That's my turning point. So that would be the question complete there. When I do that question there, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for 3 marks. The first mark I'll get for this value here, for these ones here, and also for this one here. So that's just the 1 mark, this part here. So getting these coordinates here. The next one is for identifying the turning point. So the turning point would be for this part here, and finally for drawing the graph correctly. Okay, it is just what we're looking for is a sketch, so it doesn't have to be as totally accurate as I've got there, but certainly that would earn you the 3 marks. So this is going to be out of 3 marks, this question. Okay, let's try this question here. So I've got y is equal to x minus 1, x plus 5. If you can try these, go ahead and do them. I'm just going to give you the answers now. So I'm letting y equals 0. So if y equals 0, I've got x minus 1, x plus 5. So what I have here is x minus 1 equals 0, so I've got a value of 1. I've got x plus 5 equals 0, and here I've got a value of minus 5. So for the roots that I've got there is, I've got a 1 there, and I've got a minus 5, so that's coming out to there. So there's 2 points plotted already. So that was the 1, and the minus 5 that's going here. What I'll then do is I'll let x equal 0, and when I let x equal 0, I can find out what y is equal to. So I've got 0 minus 1, 0 plus 5. So that works out to be minus 1 in that bracket, I've got 5 in that one, so that gives me an answer of minus 5. So the coordinate that I've got there is going to be 0 for x and minus 5 for y. So 0 minus 5, so that's going to give me a point there. Right, so let's find the midpoint between the two of these. So what I can go for is I can go for minus 5 plus 1 all over 2. So what that should give me is minus 4 over 2. Minus 4 over 2 will give me minus 2. So x equals minus 2 is the axis of symmetry. Okay. So what I'm going to see is I'm going to see the turning point somewhere on this line that's here. So remember, that's just in the midpoint of it. Without doing the calculation there, you can obviously count in and find out where your midpoint is for your x coordinate. Right, let's substitute the minus 2 in and find the turning point. So what I'll do is I've got y is equal to a minus 2 minus 1 and minus 2 plus 5. From there I should have minus 3, and I've got a 3 that's coming up here. That should give me an answer of minus 9. So the coordinate that I'm looking for as a turning point is going to be the minus 2 minus 9. So I'll plot that now. So minus 2 minus 9 appears down here, and there's the points that I need to draw the curve. So what I'll do is I'll just draw the curve through here. So coming from there down to here, turning and back up again. So I'm going through the point there and there. There we go. Right, again, what I'm doing is getting the same marks as I've seen here. So it's out of 3 marks, making sure that the drawing's correct and making sure that the turning point's identified, which was minus 2, minus 9, and the values cutting through here are clearly stated. So what we can do for this one here is, why don't we just make sure that we state the coordinates of this one here, and this one here would be 0, minus 5. Finally, let's go ahead and do this question here. Okay. Right, same process. What I'll do is I'll find the roots by letting y equals 0. So if I've got 0 equals x minus 2, x plus 4, from there I can see that x minus 2 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. So x equals 2, x equals minus 4. Right away I've got the points to plot. So there's my roots. So I've got 2 and I've got minus 4. Fire them in there. Okay, so that's going to be 2 and that's going to be minus 4. From there what I'll do is I'll let x equal 0 to find out where it cuts through the y-axis. So that's getting me the y-intercept. So y is equal to, and I'm substituting a 0 in here and a 0 in there. That gives me minus 2, and I'm going to be multiplying that by 4, so that gives me minus 8. So the coordinate that I've got there is going to be 0 for x, minus 8 for y. So that's going to be down here somewhere. Okay, so that there was 0, minus 8, and that was not the turning point, whoops, that's going to be the y-intercept. There we go. And from there, what we'll do is we'll then go ahead and try and find the axis of symmetry. So for these ones here, I could count in the way to try and get it, or what I'll do is I'll just add the two numbers together and take the mean of them. So minus 4 plus 2, all over 2 will give me minus 2 on the top, divided by 2 gives me minus 1. So x equals minus 1 is the axis of symmetry. And just remember, when you're asked for the equation of the axis of symmetry, make sure that you have an x is equal to. Okay, don't leave it as just a number. Right, we'll substitute the minus 1 into the equation that I've got at the top. So y is equal to minus 1 minus 2, minus 1 plus 4, and from there what you should get is minus 3 times 3, which equals minus 9. So my turning point value is the minus 1, minus 9. Minus 1, minus 9. Okay, so that's my turning point. And that is equal to minus 1, minus 9. And my turning point would be there. So I can draw through the points that I've got, from there to there, through this point here, and back up through there. And that's the 3 marks for that question there. Right, let's go on to the final question in this section. This is the section 1.2 standard. So what I've got here is I've got to, for the following parabola equations, I have to write down the axis of symmetry, which we did previously, so this might help us out, and write the coordinates of the turning point and state maximum or minimum. Okay, so that would be the nature of the graph. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm going to write down the turning point first of all, although I'm asked for that in the second part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the turning point from here, because I know the turning point is the opposite of that, and I'll take that for my y coordinate. So this one for my x coordinate, because the graph with a positive number in there has shifted to the left. So the turning point is going to be minus 3, opposite of that, and I'll just take the y coordinate as the value that's sitting there just now. So the turning point is minus 3, minus 2. From there, I know that for the graphs that I did previously, I know that if I've got the turning point, that coordinate there, the x coordinate, is going to be my axis of symmetry. So I can see the axis of symmetry there. The axis of symmetry would be -1 there. Okay, so I know that if I've got the turning point, the x-coordinate is going to be my axis of symmetry. So for part number 1, I've got the axis of symmetry. Axis of symmetry is, and it's x is equal to -3 for this one here. And that's part 1 complete. So for part 2, what I'll do is I'll just make sure that I write down the coordinates of the turning point again. So the turning point is -3, -2, and then from there I have to state whether it's a maximum or a minimum. So remember, if it's a maximum, so what that means is it would turn at its top value, it goes up to a maximum point and comes back down the way. If it's a minimum, what it would do is it would turn at the bottom or the lowest point that it would turn at, that's there. So usually that's a wee kind of smiley face. Okay, the reason for that would be that x squared term is positive, so positive is going to be happy, and if it's like this one here, then this is a wee kind of sad face, so that's going to be a negative, so a negative sad face. So, and it's all to do with whether it's an x squared is positive, x squared is negative, and from this one here I can see if I square that bracket out, x squared will be positive value. So if it's positive, the state of it is going to be a minimum. So it's a minimum turning point. Okay, and make sure that you state that. Right, looking at the marks for this question here, I'm going to get 1 mark for getting the axis of symmetry, which is this value here, and it must be x is equal to -3, not -3 on its own. I'm going to get further mark for getting the turning point, and 1 mark for stating it's a minimum turning point. Okay, so let's have a look at this again. Let's look at this question here, so B and C. You can freeze the video and try these ones yourself. Right, for B, what I'm going to do is, again, I'm just going to write down the turning point first of all, because that's going to help me how to do this one. So if that's a +5, then I know that it's slid to the left, so it's going to be a -5, and I'll take that number there as my y-coordinate. So for part 1, if I look for the axis of symmetry, what I'm going to say is that it's going to be the same as my x kind of coordinate of my turning point. So what I've got is x is equal to -5 is my equation. For part 2, what I've got is turning point, -5, 3, and from there I can see that x squared is going to be positive if I multiply that bracket out. So a positive happy face turns at the bottom, so it's a minimum turning point. So it's a minimum turning point. Okay. Again, mark for the equation of the axis of symmetry, mark for the turning point, and the final mark for stating the state or the nature of the turning point that's there. Finally, last part we've got here is I'm going to write down the turning point again. Turning point's the opposite of that. If that's a -6, it's slid the graph along to the right hand side. So that's going to be 6. Take the value from there, it's 4. First of all, I'll get my equation of the axis of symmetry. And what I have for that is my x-coordinate. So x is equal to 6 is the answer for that one. For part 2, my turning point is going to be 6, 4. And finally, I know that when I square this out, that's going to be a positive x squared. Positive x squared is a minimum turning point. And 3 marks for that. So this mark here, this question here, is out of 3. So remember that out of questions 6, 7, 8 and 9, we've got 9 marks out of all of these. You need 5 marks to pass it. Let's try and get as many marks as you possibly can in this. And remember, there's loads of practice that you can do from your textbooks.